Hi, and welcome to another edition of Tina's Take on AI. We are really excited today to talk to Megan Maloney of Maloney and Associates, who's going to talk about how she re-envisions large-scale projects. And she's going to tell you about that. But it's just fascinating to meet another woman in an industry that is dominated by men. And as somebody who's come through the financial services and through truck driving, I completely relate to both the challenges and the rewards. And so I was really excited to have Megan on today to talk a little bit about what she's the vision for Maloney and Associates, and then what she's delivering to the market, which is so unique and special. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Megan. Go ahead. Tell us about your journey, Megan. I'm excited to hear more.
Thank you, Tina. Thank you so much for having me. So my journey started in the military in the 90s, and I started as a soldier in 74 Foxtrot, and that's a software analyst. And I kind of started as a developer, but quickly realized that I don't like development, and my mind was more excited about testing, breaking, and getting things fixed. So I pivoted my career and went into testing and quality assurance and kind of worked my way up once I got out of the military, kind of worked my way up through corporate America and found my place in testing and automation of testing. So automation has been around for a long time and AI has been around for a long time. The first time I started using automation was for Circuit City. We were doing a new application and it was really repetitive, and we automated it using Windrunner. And for those of you who don't know, that's now HP and Load Runner and all of the different things. But back then, you needed a programmer to actually write automation. And it was very complicated and very time consuming, and changes to that were very complicated. So maintaining your scripts in testing has always been a problem. But once you have it automated, whoa, you can't, all of the problems that we identified along the way to get automation to work. And one of those things is development and testing have to be partners in order for that to work. Because if your code is bad and it's not got standards, your automation is not going to work. So that learning how to negotiate, not managing, but directing the development team to write code with standards was part of the biggest challenge I had. But once I learned how to do that, it became part of the, hey, we're going to roll out some automation. But before we do that, we're going to talk to development. We're going to understand how their coding standards work, what they have in place to make sure that every time they write some code, it's not going to break our automation. And then around 2012, I discovered a product that had machine learning in it, and it's called Tosca. And what that allowed us to do was to identify places that we had common errors, and we would be able to fix those and look in those and get smarter in the way we were able to start testing. So I kind of went down this journey through testing, automation, and AI throughout my career. And then one day I woke up and I said, I really should be doing this for me, because I've
Yeah.
always wanted to start my own business, to be in control of my own destiny, really, instead of, making other companies wealthy. Why not take a chance and invest in myself? So I worked for Deloitte and I did a lot of good things there. We did a transformation. I've worked for some of the big companies, JP Morgan, Circuit City, Wells Fargo, just to name a few different companies. And what I've learned along the way is everybody brings something to the table. But what I found that I like the most is the human aspect of developing software. So I've always managed high performing teams, and I've done this by building cultures that people want to work,
Yeah.
right? Because if you don't want to come to work, you're not always going to get the best from people. But if you create an environment where people want to be, they really give you everything they have. And so that's a little bit about my journey. I'm about 1 year in as my own consulting firm. I've done some projects that are pretty interesting, and maybe we'll get into them. But that's kind of how I got my started in the military and just kept moving into the civilian world. And I'm not looked back to the military.
So when you think about sort of an ideal client, what kind of projects are you looking for or thinking about?
Sure. So my ideal companies are small to mid-sized range private equity firms. I've done government space, but I like working with smaller companies because there's less red tape. And my business model is to come in, do the projects right the first time, come back for another project, not to stay with you forever because we need to fix everything that we didn't fix while we were building it. So that I prefer companies that have the ability to do that. Of course, I'm my own as a small business and a small woman owned business. You don't always get to pick all of your clients, but that's what I search.
Yeah. And when you come in, you're evaluating operating systems, you're evaluating like just mapping out processes, like what specifically do you sort of look for?
So my specialties involve project management, so helping get the project started, doing business process mapping. And the business process mapping is, in my opinion, in my experience, the most important aspect of it. And I've partnered with a company in Ireland that goes out and it reads the code and it comes back and it's able to map all the processes that are in the code. So within a very short time, what used to take months and months, we can now do in weeks. And of course, the getting the business processes mapped is only part of it because code is only as good as it was written.
Right,
And
right.
so then we've got the processes mapped and then we start to review them with the business. And we have to have those conversations, the telling us exactly what it was coded to do. We can recreate that all day long. But anybody that's been in the world in corporate America knows that IT gives you gifts, but sometimes you have to come up with your own workarounds and your own processes to do your job because you're on the backlog for another 4 years before your project is done. It's combining both the what is there, but also getting that from the people so that when we do this process mapping and once we start to do projects, we know that we're going to build the right thing.
So I know one of the things you specializes in is it's not just automation and software; it's also adding sort of a human flair to it. So maybe talk a little bit about where you see that opportunity to add your human touch.
Yeah. So we did this for a government agency and we went in and mapped out their code and we found that we got about 80% of it. And when we started to talk to our client about we need to interview the business to make sure that this is in line with what they're wanting, it was almost people didn't want to give up their resources, right? So they were like, well, you've got automation, you just did it. And the wonderful thing was we were able to walk through a process with a team. We said, just give us one team, let us walk through their process, right? And in front of all of the leadership, we were able to map out 4 processes that were business critical that weren't identified in this. If we hadn't talked to those people, we wouldn't have identified those processes and we would have built a system that only delivered a percentage of the capability. And so,
Yeah, makes perfect sense. Yeah, because when you think about it, like you said in the beginning, we learn to adapt, and not everything that we adapt is in the code, right? It's like it's the human workarounds that are truly the difference. And so I love that. Like, so you're able to go in and identify some of the factors that are making it work today,
yes,
but then you're able to make it better, presumably, with including it into the program.
yes. And Part of the challenge that we have is with in my experience, anyways, part of the challenge that we have is AI has improved our speed and efficiency
Yeah.
so much, but it only improves it if we do the diligence. And
Yeah.
that is, we can't just say, hey, AI,
Yeah.
go
Yeah.
create this for me. And they will, it will. But if you don't test and you don't verify and you don't cross reference that it does it with, that it does what it needs to do, it's garbage in and garbage out all day.
Yeah. You know what's interesting about that is I was reading something this weekend about, and we just talked about it before we started recording about there's so much talk and so much noise, right, about AI, but people are like, it's not working. I'm a band that people are not using it. They're not adopting it. And I think it's exactly that, because it doesn't include the things that we do to make things work, right? If you just tell it to do, and like, I think that if you think about adoption, and that's why one of the things that we do is we stay with the projects, because what you think you know and you need as your actual execution it may be different. And so I think it's very interesting because what you're saying makes complete sense. Automation is automation, but without context, it's just automation.
Yeah. It's only as good as it's programmed to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, even the basic tools,
Yeah.
like the basic tools are that if you don't tell it and train it correctly, you can't blame it. That's what you told it to do, right?
And one of my pet peeves, it makes me insane, is when people rush to get with the trends.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever
Yeah.
been
Yes.
on a phone and you're trying to get to a human being to answer a question, but you've got the
the loop.
AI bot
Yeah.
telling you, and there's nothing more frustrating to me than half-baked software going into production.
Yeah. Well, it's also, at some point, sometimes it's very handy, right, to handle 90% of the calls, but that 10% that actually needs to talk to a human, it shouldn't be this hard to talk to a human. It's like 90% of the calls don't need to talk to humans. They're just like very, routine questions, but sometimes you got a problem that you need to talk to somebody about. So it's like very interesting.
Yeah.
So can you share an example of where you installed automation and it was a pretty dramatic, or like what the results of that were?
Yeah. So the first time I implemented automation in scale was at CFA Institute. And we had just done an upgrade of Oracle, and it was not a very good upgrade. It was plagued with problems and to the tune of 300 defects in production a day.
Oh,
And
goodness.
that was primarily because they didn't have controls around development, deployment, testing. It was just kind of the Wild West. And one of the things I was able to first do, I said, before we can do anything, we've got to get stable. We can't automate what we have
Yeah.
because, it's unstable. So I developed processes with the development manager and the release manager, and we got stability in all of the environments first, and we got our code bases aligned. And then what we did is we went on a magical mystery tour and we went around to all of the businesses and we said, show me what you do.
Yeah.
I need to know, if you had to keep the lights on today, tell me what you do and let's rank them. So we identified all the business processes, and that became our marching orders. And that became what we were going to automate. So we didn't look at requirements. We didn't look at the code. We looked at, what is the business doing? What do they need to keep doing? And what, if those things broke, what would that cost the business? And we just went down the list. We came up with 85 business processes. And this was a mid-sized company, about 500 employees worldwide. And 85 doesn't sound like a lot, but we had a library of 10,000
Mm.
test cases. And 300 defects a day with 10,000 test cases told me that we had a lot of testing, but we weren't testing the right things.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's all about doing it right the first time, right? So I was able to get that done in a very short time, in
I
6
was going to
months.
ask you about the time frame. Like, how long
Yeah,
does the project? I mean, that sounds like an enormous project.
yeah.
How long did it take you to do that?
6 months we had done 60%
That's
of that list of 85.
wow.
And within a year, we had fully automated regression, and we went from um, testing cycles and regression being 3 weeks down to 3 days. 3 days to do a regression may sound like a lot. However, the actual runtime was about 4 hours of automation. However, it took 3 days because you still have to stop and fix problems along the way, right?
Right, right.
You don't run the automation and go, okay, we're done,
Yeah, yeah,
because
yeah.
it
Yeah,
always finds something.
yeah, yeah.
So you know, 3 days to get that right. And some days, some cycles, it wouldn't always take 3 days, but I always allocated that so that we could fix whatever was broken. And we went from an organization that was plagued with defects to an organization that had 0 defects on delivery.
Oh, wow. That's
Yeah,
amazing.
it's huge.
It's
It's huge.
huge.
Yeah. But in order to do that, you have to have leadership has to want that. If leadership just wants to get it out the door, like we did for the Oracle upgrade, you get it out the door and you pay. You always pay somewhere. You're going to
Yeah,
pay a
yeah,
piper
yeah.
in the front end, on the back end, you're going to pay somewhere. And if you
Yeah,
can
yeah.
get your clients to understand that they're going to pay, let's pay at the front when it's a little less painful.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that is the biggest challenge I've had in the software development world, is getting clients, leaders, CIOs to understand paying it first is the best place.
And if you think about, like, what would you give as one sort of strategic tip for, business owners right now? Like, what would you say they should be looking at as sort of like this AI explosion continues over the next? I mean, it feels like we're just at the beginning of this whole, I know it's been around for you who's been in the industry, right? For the rest of us, like, it's just at the verge of people are still trying to figure out how to integrate it into their operating systems. So, like, what strategic advice would you provide for business owners who are sort of saying, I need to do something, but I just don't know what to do?
Right. I would go and tell and ask them, what's the biggest problem that you
Yeah,
need to solve?
yeah,
And if their biggest problem is my snail mail is not going fast enough, AI is not really going to help them, right? But if they can define what their problem is and they know what it is, then we can start to direct them. When in my experience, try not to allow us to boil the ocean, right?
yeah,
So if we can focus on your top problem, your top 2 problems, your top 3 problems, and get those solved, then we know we're going to solve the right thing. And I also, when I caution them to say, let's plan what we want to do. Let's plan it. Let's do it right. Because a lot of times people want to start running right away. Okay, we've got the
oh,
money.
yeah. I
I've got
see
to do
that.
it right now. We can plan along the way.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes, we can do anything you want. However, we probably want to know exactly what we want to do. And I find that once we level set expectations and we get all on the same page, we can achieve the goals very easily. It's those uncomfortable conversations. And my business model is not to tell you what you want to hear. My business model is to tell you what you need to hear.
right, right.
So I'm not here to waste my time and my billing effort just for the sake of making money. I want you to leave going, yeah, that was great service, and we did exactly what we needed to do.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the difference between business with longevity, right? Because if you think about, I mean, just for my business, we're not creating anything custom, but when I think about somebody saying, the boards are really on them to automate. And there's reluctance, right? There's reluctance because they don't want to lose their people. There's so many emotions related to that automation. And so part of the challenge is to get them to say, we're not replacing your people, we're augmenting them, right? And so I feel like that's a way to get the conversation to a place where they're more open to it, because that there's a human element of reluctance to replace human beings. Now, some people don't have that problem. They're like, whatever's more efficient, right? But some founders and CEOs are like, I don't want to lose a half of my workforce. I want to find a way to repurpose them.
Right. And what I see are two, right? We've got the ones who just let's balls to the wall and do everything and automate everything and to hell with all the people, excuse me. But you're right. The ones that want to augment that I'm sort of still human.
Yeah.
I tend to prefer those type because I know the strengths and power and of the tools, but I also know the weaknesses of the tools. And if we aren't careful and we aren't diligent, then we'll be in a bigger mess because the more you do, the more it gets done. But if it's all wrong, then you're just creating a pile of more backlog.
Yeah. And I think the interesting thing is when you talk to, look, there's no doubt AI is here to stay, right? It makes, it's solving so many problems, right? It's solving talent shortage. It's solving operational efficiency. It's reducing your costs dramatically. I mean, there's so many factors why business owners are looking at and should be seriously looking at AI, but it's like, how do you balance that with some of the factors that is, you don't want to, like, just the human factors of, I still need somebody to manage the projects. I still need, connectivity is kind of like the most human thing we have is we need somebody to talk to other people to sell them our services. We need creativity. We need people. Like, that's the one thing AI is not that great at is, marketing creativity. That's something that we do really as humans do well. So they can automate the system. The creative is not something that they're particularly good at yet.
Yeah.
I mean, who knows right now that they're not. So it's interesting.
I love that we are training AI to do all that creative stuff for us. However, there's, humans, and this is something that I'm going to predict as we continue with AI and CGI and all of the fabulous technological advances, human connection is going to be more and more valuable as time goes on. And so in my judgment and the companies that don't understand that humans crave humans and they want to replace us all, I feel their time will come. Because if you watch what's happening and you look, people are social media is crazy because we want to watch other people doing crazy things, right? But as you watch and you start to see that automation and AI are generating the content and they're very big, there will come a time when we're like, wait, I want to see a real person doing something. Right now we've got both mixes. So humans contact is going to be increasingly more valuable in my opinion.
That's a good place to wrap it up because, we're two humans talking about AI. But it is, you can see it already, Megan, at conferences and things. People, I mean, they've never been so busy because people are working from home and they want to meet other people and share ideas. And so, it's really interesting for me as well because I see that and I think, wow, I want to go to conferences. I want to go meet people. I want to do things like that too because how many Zoom calls can you do? Right? We do Zooms all day.
Right.
And by the way, it's saved an incredible amount of time, right? The fact that we can do this,
Absolutely.
it's shrunk the world. But on the other hand, we do crave human connection, I think, which is what your point was, is that
Yeah.
that's only going to get, as AI sort of that balance continues, it's going to just, I think, amplify. So I agree with you.
Yeah. It's
So thank
interesting.
you. Any final thoughts before we wrap up?
No, thank you so much for having me. And I just continue to watch the trends and hang tight for the ride and do what we can.
I'm with you. I'm with you. So thank you very much for joining us today. Megan, thank you very much to our viewers. And don't forget, this program is sponsored by the growthstack.ai. And I look forward to continuing our dialogue. And maybe in 6 months, we'll have a regroup about where we are.
That sounds great.
Machines have taken over.
You'll have my avatar with no wrinkles.
Well, thanks again so much. And if you could just stay on while we wrap up. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.
Okay.